Okay, so for my 5E lesson, I chose the standard 2 ESS 2.1, which is Earth Science. It's using information from sources to provide evidence that Earth events can occur quickly or slowly. And then I'm also integrating 2.1.W.2, which is a language arts standard. That's basically talking about students working within groups, sharing responsibility for collaborative work, and then just overall um, valuing contributions made by each group member. So the purpose of this lesson that for me is I want the students to be able to focus on the question, how do wind and water change the shape of the land? So nature is a big part of the world around us, especially for children. Children are always outside playing, visually seeing things, manipulating objects outside, at the on the playground outside of their home. And so they have a lot of background knowledge of the outside world, but I kind of want to teach them about the world around them and get them critically thinking about what things are and how they were formed. And so they will basically begin addressing phenomenons in nature, and then this will help them better understand. So the disciplinary core idea that goes with the standard is some things can change the shape of the land and earth quickly, slowly, or over a long period of time. This is a focus for the lesson that I am zeroing in on, which is erosion. The science and engineering practice, or SEPs, that goes with this core idea is planning and carrying out investigations. Students will make observations to collect data, to understand a phenomenon, and the cross-cutting concepts that go with the standard is stability and change. The lens that is putting on for the students is stability and change, which helps the students understand the idea that many things can change slowly or rapidly. And so I'm going to kind of go down here to the 5E and begin talking about that. So for the engage lesson, I will go to this YouTube link. And I'm going to quickly show the students to activate prior knowledge, a video, a short clip of the Grand Canyon. So that just goes on for another 8 minutes. I, of course, would not show the rest of that because it kind of goes into greater detail about the Grand Canyon, but I'd probably stop it a little after this video. And then after showing that video, I will have the students fill out a formative assessment probe, probably on their little tablets in the classroom. For ELLs or students that are not on the reading levels, I will read the question or the statement and then read the options and then allow us orally to discuss it and why, they picked that, which we're going to do that anyway, so it's helpful for everyone. So this is the probe. 6 friends were standing along the rim of the Grand Canyon. Looking down, they could see layers of rock in the Colorado River at the bottom. They wondered how the Grand Canyon formed. They each had a different idea. So Sarah thought that the Grand Canyon was formed when the Earth was formed. It just got bigger over time. Berkeley thought that the Grand Canyon formed from earthquakes that cracked open the land and pulled it apart. Karis thought that the Colorado River and streams slowly carved out the Grand Canyon. Catherine thinks that a huge flood rushed through the land and formed the Grand Canyon. Zach thinks that the river got so heavy that it sunk down through the rock and formed the walls of the Grand Canyon. And then Elise doesn't agree with any of the ideas. She thinks that the Grand Canyon was formed in some other way. So then at the bottom, they'd be able to choose one of these. And then at the bottom, they would be able to explain their thinking. So then after filling out the formative assessment probe, we would, of course, discuss the ideas and what everyone thought, kind of talking about let's see, their ideas aloud, discuss further developments for their idea, but pique their interest about other peers' ideas. So this kind of gets the ball rolling for the investigation or the demonstration that I'm going to be doing next, to have them kind of start critically and creatively thinking about this well-known structure and how it came to be. So then in the explore phase, it's just going to be a lot easier for me to just explain it rather than click this video, but this is kind of where I found the idea. So I'm going to be implementing a demonstration-based activity or strategy known as the PO, the predict, observe, and explain phase. The reason why I chose to do this specific one is because it can get kind of messy, especially for second graders. I think that it's best if I just did it. And then also it's a great way for them to focus on minds on instead of hands on, so that they cannot become distracted. They'll be able to pay attention and kind of just really all focus in on their prediction and their observation so that we can explain it later. And so basically what you'll need for this is 2 cookie sheets, a spray bottle, a small rock, and 5 plastic cups, one that contains dry sand, one with wet sand, one with dirt, one with wet dirt or mud, and one with mud mixed with weeds. So basically, what I would be doing is having the students predict what will happen first if I were to turn over let's say, the dry sand and the wet sand, turn them over and begin spraying 20 times, what would happen to the piles. So one is dry sand, one is wet sand, and I'm going to spray 20 times like this back and forth, and they're supposed to predict what's going to happen to the sand. And so then I will do that, and you will begin to see that the dry sand kind of absorbs the water while the wet sand does not, because it already has so much water it can't absorb any more water. So then the water just begins to kind of flow down the wet sand, changing the shape because it can't absorb any water, and then it starts to pile at the bottom of the sand, just like in a puddle. And then I will again have them predict about the muds because it's kind of a different substance. And then they will predict about that. And then they will observe me do the same thing. And then the water really changes the shapes of all of them even more than it did with the sand, because mud is kind of more, dirt is more moist and wet than sand is. So the shape changes a lot more than the sand does. And so I know I'm kind of going fast with my explanation for that, but I'm already at 7 minutes, so I'm kind of trying to hurry up and explain them. But then they will observe me do this, and kind of see how water is changing the shape of land, which is the point of erosion, what we're discussing. And then we will begin explaining. So then I will have the students explain their predictions in a whole class discussion. We'll kind of talk about what we observed, how it was different than their predictions, and then we'll begin explaining what they think is happening. We'll kind of talk about it in the classroom as a whole. And then I will start introducing vocabulary ideas like erosion, weathering, stuff like that, kind of talking about how sand was made. That's like the breakdown of rocks and just all of that types of talk, because that all kind of is in, like erosion and weathering are up here, and then it kind of trickles down. And so that's what we're basically doing in the explain phase. So then in the elaborate phase, I wanted the students to be able to do more of their own work in this phase, kind of take what they learned about erosion, weathering, stuff like that, and kind of do it on their own. So for the elaborate phase, I thought it would be really fun for the students to be able to take some pen and paper, pencil and paper, and go outside. I'm going to put them into groups, and they're going to go outside to the playground, and they're going to find their own examples of erosion, or their own examples of weathering, or their own examples of these different phenomenons that are found in nature that kind of change the shape of the land. And so let's see. And then this kind of ties in the cross-cutting concept of stability and change. So I have, for example, rocks breaking apart. They can find that as an example. This is due to ice breaking apart. So, water goes in and then freezes and then expands the rock. And then tree roots growing into the sidewalk and cracking the sidewalk. That's another great one. So that's something else that we can kind of talk about. So they're going to look at all of these examples, and then we are going to come back inside and kind of discuss them, start making connections. This allows them to do making connections. And let's see what else. So asking them here what changes in nature they think happen rapidly would be beneficial, since we kind of talked about things that happened slowly or gradually. So this is which is like erosion, weathering. So I'm going to bring in some examples like volcanoes, earthquakes, tornadoes. These are things that happen more rapidly. And then the student should be using the vocabulary that we talked about in the explain phase to make the connection. So then in the evaluate phase, of course, I will go back to bringing the probe up, and then they will use the probe to reassess themselves, and then I will be able to reassess them by them picking the same or a different answer and then explaining in a different way based off of what they learned through the entire 5E lesson. And so I will be able to see their progress, and then how it went whenever I taught the lesson. And so, yeah, that is basically it. And these are my citations at the bottom. And I made it right at 10 minutes. And now let me see. Stop share. And now I'm going to stop recording.